Welcome to another one of these great sessions where we get to sit down with legends from back in the day, chat about stories, nice little fireside chat, nice and easy. We've had some great, phenomenal guests over the last, year or so, scattered around. It's not quite as regular as the Tuesday show. I am working on that. We've had to postpone a few guests, but I'm pleased to say that in the house today, we have two bad mice. Si?
Hello.
And Sean.
Yo.
Chaps, how you doing?
Good.
Nice, all right. It's handling lockdown as well as can be expected.
Oh, that way. I'll let Sean go first.
Yeah. Doing all right, actually. Doing all right. It's getting a bit tedious now, I think, for everyone. But, surviving it and, doing all right.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear, mate. Si, you all good?
Yeah. I mean, like Sean said, it's just kind of getting a little bit boring now, isn't it? So it's good that we have things like this where we can still kind of interact with people and see what's going on. Because we can't go out, can we?
I could just imagine the first night. Everyone's just going to go absolutely mental when they first come out. I think we need a 48-hour party to kick it all off.
Oh, it'll be bonkers, won't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So guys, thank you very much for joining us on the show. So look, what I wanted to do just before we kind of kick into obviously you guys meeting and getting involved with Shadow, you guys have had a great involvement and a major part in, music and the evolution of the scene back in the day. I just wanted to start off just a little bit of background about kind of musical history. So we'll kick off with you. What was that kind of, do you remember that first time you heard a track where it was like, it actually had like a connection to it, something that kind of really made you go, I'll have some of that?
My mum, she was a massive Motown fan. So she had the old record player. And them record players had you could stack loads of 7 inches on and then they would fall down. And so she had loads of them, and she would always be playing Motown. So kind of grew up around that. So there was always songs on the go. My mum was always humming to them and that. And then obviously you have your sort of like your crazies, we used to call them back then, that you used to get into. So I was into Adam and the Ants and stuff like that. The first real love that made me really start falling in love with music was, obviously a lot of people know it was hip hop and sort of the old school electro stuff. That's the stuff that really sort of first grabbed me and made me a bit of an obsessive about music.
Was you a bit of a b-boy doing a bit of breakdancing as well, or just a lover of the music?
I tried. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I know Mark Archer will probably wind me up. But yeah, I tried. We all had a roller lino, didn't we? Used to walk around, roll it out and try and do a windmill. But yeah, down the local youth club and stuff like that. But I was more into the music and the records than the breakdancing. I know it all went hand in hand. But I became a collector of records then, basically, from an early age. I was going up to London and going to was it Groove Records down in Soho and Hitman Records and stuff like that. My mum was having a fit that I was going up on the train on my own and buying imports and stuff. So the kind of local shops to myself and Sean, that's where you could get your electros, your street sound stuff. They weren't too hot on the imports, so that's when I would be going up to London and getting that. But that was like the real first obsessive love of music I had, was like electro, the old school rap, obviously a lot of the US stuff. That was my early music obsession. That was
nice, good stuff. And Sean, what about yourself?
So I mean, my dad was like a massive blues fan, blues and a bit of jazz, but blues. I mean, he was obsessed with blues, and that would always be playing, and he'd be playing his guitar, stuff like that. But I'm not going to lie and say that had, that I was feeling that at all. It was just like, I couldn't really care less about that at the time. Then just the usual things. I was really into Adam and the Ants as well, actually, back in the day. Then just your regular pop music, and then my brother was older brother was really into like the old electro. He used to buy a lot of imports of, you know, the original, I don't know, like, you know, well, original Sugar Hill stuff and Man Parish and things like that. Again, I liked all of that, but it was certainly the moment I can pinpoint, the track that I can pinpoint was hearing Big Fun by Inner City at like a rugby club disco or something like that, when I'd had like, you know, 3 pints of lager, which is a lot for me in those days, or something like that. And the strobe light was going, that came on, and that was the light bulb moment for me, you know. And I can still remember it very vividly, just going, what the hell is this? And then that was it. The touch paper was lit.
Nice. Well, do you know what? I could have been the unofficial third member of Two Bad Mice, because I also used to like Adam and the Ants as well.
Right, yeah, they were great, right?
I did. Do you know what I did? I don't have a cool backstory. I wasn't into like electro and hip hop. I used to listen to Terence Trent D'Arby and stuff like that, and Adam and the Ants. I was very uncool as a kid when it came to musical tastes. And then for me, it was like hitting that kind of sort of acid house kind of bit, and I was like, we'll have some of that. So you'd mentioned that basically you guys, you know, grew up together. So I'm taking you guys have known each other for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I would say not sort of like through early school years and that, but we kind of started getting to know each other a bit through BMXing and stuff like that. I would say, what year do you reckon that was, Sean? I think that was probably around the first or second year of secondary school or something like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess it would have been like, what, 83, 84 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I remember. I don't have loads of memories from back then. There's certain things you pick out in there. I remember Sean's mates were building a half pipe in a set of woods in Hertford, and I remember going down to that because you guys were helping build the ramp. But yeah, it was the BMX years kind of, wasn't it? And then sort of skateboards going over to Nebworth House and all that sort of stuff. So it would have been
So that would have been like mid 80s into, you know, through to the late 80s, where we kind of knew each other a bit, but not that well. It wasn't until maybe 88 or something where we started to get to know each other a bit better, and then maybe 88 or 89 where we really got talking, I think.
Yeah, we would like bump into each other at skate park, like Coastline House. So yeah, we would bump into each other at skate parks and meet up in Hertford and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, BMXing and skateboarding, them early years before the whole music thing started to happen. To be fair,
do you guys remember what BMXs you had?
Yeah, he's still got some.
Yeah. I've got a few here. So yeah, I mean, the one I had, like, my first proper one was a Talker 280. So I would have got that in probably 82 or something like that. And a few years ago, I bought the closest I could get to that, which is the Talker MX, which was the one before it, and 81. So I've got that there, and I've got an old Harrow, and then a couple of new race bikes and a cruiser, and I've got quite a lot knocking around here.
You have quite the collection there for sure.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask
Diamondback, if I remember.
Diamondback, yeah, they were. I had someone obviously borrowed it from someone else, painted it all green, and then sold it to me. And that was probably one of the best bikes that I'd had. Because before that, I had a thing called a Pooch, which I
remember the Pooch. Yeah,
I actually was on Barn Hill in Wembley, and I came down the hill, did a jump. I probably was only sort of a metre or so high, and then I landed, and the bottom frame just basically snapped in half. I just flew head over heels and literally just crawled home with my tail between my legs with this bike snapped in half. My dad was not too happy about that, to say the least.
Yeah, I did that to my first bike. I had a Huffy as my first bike, so another like American steel one that weighed a ton. I did exactly the same thing, did a jump and snapped the top tube, snapped clean off. And just had two halves of a bike, basically. Yeah.
You could join the circus with those, but that's about it. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I still had it as it goes, because it's probably worth a fortune now. It was a Diamondback. I hated it because it had a 3-piece crank, and hardly anything had 3-piece cranks back then. I think more of the racing BMXs had 3-piece cranks. Yeah. But it had black Skyways, white wall tyres. It looked really, really good, but the 3-piece crank was utter shit. But if I kept it, it'd probably be worth a bit of money now. So there you go.
So, can I ask who is the better BMXer out of the two of you guys?
Sean. Yeah, it was.
It probably was. Yeah,
it was definitely Sean. I mean, there was the BMX guy.
Look, where is it? Can you see? There's a trophy there.
Yeah, there you go.
Me. Look at that.
There we go. Nice.
What was the BMX program that used to be on, Sean?
It was called. Oh God! It was presented by Andy Ruffle, wasn't it?
But the guy from Hitchin who had the shop Custom Riders, was it Custom?
Yeah, Mason.
He was on it, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, we were nowhere near his standard, and I could literally just about pull a wheelie, and was it a foot plant? That was about it. So.
It sounds like there was a potential career. If you guys hadn't gone into music, you could have been, aging BMXers, like touring around the world.
Yeah, no.
Mate, I can barely walk up a hill now, let alone pull any stones.
All right, so obviously you guys got to know each other pretty well around the BMXs. So when did kind of music start playing a part in the friendship?
Sorry?
Okay, right. So, I mean, we've told this story quite a lot of times, but it's always interesting because, it's talking about a famous club in Hartford, and it always references a couple of tracks that we always get asked about. So obviously, I was into my hip hop and stuff, and I was kind of dismissive of most other types of music, and I went down to this little local club, which I think it was called Stags at the time, wasn't it, Sean? And that was kind of like it was almost like a pre-club in some aspects. People were starting to go out to what were known as acid house parties at the time. But I don't know why I arrived down there that night, because it kind of wasn't really my cup of tea, and I hadn't taken no interest in the acid house scene whatsoever. And Sean was playing down there, and he played Young MC Know How, which obviously everybody knows Know How.
Yeah.
And that kind of kept my interest going in like remaining down there. So I thought, this is kind of cool. And then Sean played grand piano, and that was obviously complete opposite end of the spectrum to the stuff I was listening to at the time. But for some reason it grabbed me, and I can only put it down to I was really into that type of cut and paste music that was being made by Cold Cut, Dynamix 2 and Double D and Steinsky. And, the stuff that they were doing on Reel to Reel and stuff like that, really early sampling and stuff. And I kind of sort of like probably made a comparison to it. I mean, obviously it's a great track, but I think Sean said to me, it's almost kind of like a mix of tracks. And that for some reason that just kind of really, really got me interested in sort of like listening to something else. And I think we chatted outside, didn't we, for a little while?
Yeah.
And that was obviously, I don't know, people that know Hartford and its history. You had Stags there, and then literally just up the road, you would have had Parliament Music later on in latter years. So you had this like little road and then a square opposite, which was Parliament Square. And that's where a lot of people used to sit after being in Stags. And I think we sat there, didn't we, chatting about music. And that's when we first started talking about, raves and things like that. I hadn't really taken much attention to what was going on.
What year was this?
It must have been 90.
No, I think it was earlier than that. I think grand piano would have been 89. Definitely 89.
I hadn't been to a rave. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I hadn't been.
Yeah, or even late 88. I think it could have been, but probably 89. Might have to Google that for a date.
You probably get this quite a lot though, Jay, don't you? When you're talking to people that have been involved in the old school scene.
I can narrow it down to a decade, but don't ask me to narrow it down to a year. Yeah, fair enough. So Sean, by this stage, you already DJing then. So what kind of got you the bug for getting turntables and DJing?
Yeah, I don't know. I can remember when I was at school, I used to kind of do that. I used to make like mixtapes and, you know, pausing and doing all of that kind of thing, which, you know, I don't know why, because I know loads of people used to do that kind of thing, but I don't know where everyone got the idea of, like, you know, recording a bit of a soundtrack and then pausing it and recording a bit of you know, a record and then a bit off the radio or something and doing these weird mixtapes. So I used to do that at school, and then I started buying some records. I got a mixer for Christmas, which probably would be Christmas 1988, I would say. And then, you know, I hijacked the little turntable off the top of my mum and dad's like music center, and then bought a secondhand Sony turntable that had pitch control, a little rotary pitch control on the corner, and the strobe light like a Technics. I bought that off some guy for like 30 quid. And then started doing that. And then, I was buying quite a lot of records, started going raving, and just really loved DJing, you know, just in my bedroom and that. And then started getting maybe a couple of gigs here and there, a couple of local pubs where all kind of football hooligans turned ravers used to hang out. You know, and you're kind of in at the deep end there, because, you know, these guys, you know, a few years older than you, or all the local thugs, you know, and they're like, who's this little kid turned up? And then, you know, half an hour later, they're going, oh, yeah, wicked tunes, mate. So that would probably be 88 into 89, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what really gave me the bug. It was just something that I was really just interested in doing, kind of thing.
And sorry, go on, John.
No, I was going to say I never really, like most people. Well, I guess maybe some people set out with a kind of want to do it as a career. Never saw that at all. Just was doing it for fun, and then making, you know, I would do lots of proper mixtapes then, you know, like not like these pause cassettes that I used to do at school, but, you know, doing two sides of a D90, you know, every kind of 3-4 weeks or something, just handing around to my mates, and they used to hand them to, you know, other people. So there used to be like loads of copies of those floating around.
Nice. And what about you, Si? When did you get the bug for DJing?
Obviously, when I was buying the hip hop stuff, I remember my dad built some sort of like wooden surround for some decks, and we had a little back room in my mum and dad's garage where me and all my mates and my brother and that could go and hang out. And we bought a strobe light, and we just sit in there. And it wasn't even so much mixing; it was literally just playing through the records. And that was obviously all the old hip hop stuff, sort of like, you know, JVC Force, KRS-One, all that sort of malarkey. And then I went on to Sound Lab. Was it DLP ones, the belt drive ones?
Yeah, that's the ones. Yeah.
I think everybody had a little go on them. So that was basically had hardly any room in my bedroom, but we had an old bunk bed which I was on the bottom of. My brother had got his own room then, so we got an old door, an old internal door, and we put it on the top of that bunk. And we put the two Sound Labs on top of that, and the old realistic mixer with the old display, and used to muck around with them, and then obviously got shifted on to Technics. But I was never really sort of like massively interested in playing out in them early days. I was kind of buying records more sort of as a collector. I mean, Sean was playing out loads and loads and doing mixtapes and stuff like that. I was doing the odd little mixtape here and there. And just sort of like, you know, like kind of like what you are now, Jay, just collecting vinyl and stuff.
Yeah.
and sort of like I said, got the techniques, and that was kind of it. I can't even remember the first time I actually played out anywhere, but it would have been fairly later on, I think.
Yeah. All right. So at this point, so you're both kind of interested in music. So when does the kind of music production side of things come in? Sean, were you kind of progressing from DJing into the production side?
No, hadn't. It was something that I think, like everyone, gets to a stage when you're kind of listening when it's turning more from the records that you were buying, maybe that might be on the subsidiaries of the major labels, like I don't know, 10 records and Cool Tempo and things like that. That kind of more slightly commercial end of the dance market, if you like, that you start off at. And then when you move on to buying white labels, UK white labels and things like that, and then you realize that actually people are making this kind of stuff in their bedrooms, and then the next step is, wow, yeah, I really want to try, see if I can get into doing this. I did. My brother had like a 4-track like recorder that I was used to play around with, and I went to some like hire shop and hired this really weird early Oberheim sampler one weekend. Cost like 15 quid for the weekend or something, but I had no way to sequence it. I was just looping one sample, putting it on one track of the 4-track, and then finding another sample, looping it, trying to sync it by just literally changing the tempo of the sample and tempo of the loop to get it in with the first one, and trying to lay down 4 like tracks like that, and just messing around with that kind of stuff. But then Si said that he knew someone who had a proper studio, who lived in the same village as Si, because me and Si live like 5 miles from each other or something like that. Si was in a smaller village, and so I said, yeah. He goes, there's a guy in my village who's got a studio at his parents' house, and he's starting a record label, and that was Rob, who Si knew.
Oh wow. Okay. So
Rob Playford.
Yeah. Of course. Yes. Wow. So you literally were in there right from the very, very beginning. Then. So did you knew Rob before the label even started off? Then.
Yeah, not too well though. He went to the same school as me, but was 2 or 3 years or whatever, like older, with regards to sort of like. I think it was Richard Ailes' school. Rob was at. I'm pretty definite he was in the same school as me. But yeah, there you go. So I just used to see him sometimes at the train station. Occasionally, we didn't really know each other very well at all. And like I said, I think he was a few years above me. But we kind of knew. Well, I kind of knew his girlfriend. She ran a hairdresser's in the village. There's not many shops in the village that I grew up in. I'm still here now, and hairdressers is one of them. And we kind of had a chat with Bev and said, do you think you could convince Rob that we could come and make a track? And I think it took a bit of convincing, didn't it? I think we had to put a bit of pressure on, and I think Rob relented. I mean, Rob, that was literally at the time. We kind of knew what Rob was doing, and he was running what was obviously the very foundations, like starting the very foundations of Moving Shadow. He had a couple of tracks out, which were the sort of like the early projects. It was the Orbital project, wasn't it, Sean? So that was a white with like a little label on saying TOP, Chinese lollipops and stuff like that. And I think Charlie Says Bass and Buzz as well, wasn't it? That was the other one. But we knew Rob was making tracks and turning them into records, and also taking them to sell them in shops. I thought that was pretty mad. He was going up to London, selling them out the back of his car, basically. So we knew that he had like the studio and that, and I think I went round to his mum and dad's house a couple of times and chatted with him, but we never done anything at his mum and dad's. The first time that we actually went into the studio was when Moving Shadow kind of found its first home, which was I think it was Rob's first house.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So he'd left home and he bought this little end of terrace house in Stevenage, which, you know, if you've got some of the Moving Shadow covers from the early days, I think it's got the address on the back of them as well. And that was when we first sort of like went in to make a track. So me and Sean turned up there. I think it was a Monday night. Rob had relented and decided to let us come and muck around. I don't know what Rob was thinking was going to happen. But I mean, I didn't have a bloody clue what was going to happen. You know, I just turned up with a bag full of hip hop stuff, and I think Sean turned up with a bag full of house and techno, and that was it, really. And Rob said, "Come on, let's make a track." We didn't know what we were doing.
We really didn't know what we were doing. You know, we were really green, and we just we had a load of samples. Said, "I really like this sample, really like this sample, really like that one." But you know, in hindsight, when you're looking, you're like, "Well, there's no way they were ever going to go together." But we were trying and managed to, you know, get something together with Rob's skills as an engineer, because he was a great engineer. You know, we managed to kind of tease out a couple of tracks from the samples that we brought along, and some of the synths and drum machines and whatnot that he had in the studio. But that first experience, which was the original release, the Two Bad Mice 12-inch, which was Shadow 3, that was us just really feeling our way around, trying to understand how stuff worked, and, you know, cutting our teeth, really. But it was a massive learning experience, making that massive buzz to get a record cut to wax, and then to hear it, you know, being played. Or I can remember I was record shopping in London when I think it was either out on promo or it just come out, and I was down. Remember, for a while there was a record shop downstairs in Mash on Oxford Street. I don't know if you remember that. And I was down there, and I was like, "Oh, what's new?" Because I used to go down maybe once a month or something, record shopping around Soho. I went down there. What's new? And that was the first thing he pulled out, played. He was like, "Oh yeah, check this out." And I was like,
"That must have been quite surreal."
It was surreal, you know. But I was too embarrassed to say, "Yeah, I made that."
Did you buy it?
No, I said, "I've already got it." I said, "Oh yeah, I got that one already." But yeah, so that was. As I said, Rob took some convincing by Bev, his girlfriend at the time, to give us a chance. But we were just so keen, you know, to be involved, and not just in making records, but also being involved in Moving Shadow, you know, which now had a couple of releases, was getting some traction, I guess, as you would say, in today's terms, but you know, getting noticed. And we were just like kids. Well, we were kids. Well, no, we weren't quite kids. We were like, you know, late teens, I guess, but super excited to be involved. So anything that needed doing for Moving Shadow, like, you know, picking up promos, stamping promos, putting stickers on, stuffing mailers, whatever it was, you know, we were like, yeah, absolutely, we'll do anything. And so, you know, that's so at the same time as we started making music with Rob, we were starting to get quite heavily involved at Moving Shadow, albeit, you know, being kind of glorified T-boys.
Because it's quite an experience. Obviously now, you know, you put a track out in the world and you got instant feedback within half an hour. You know, you got X amount of comments, and, you know, before you know it, within 24 hours, you know, you got a general sentiment of how people have taken the track around the world. You know, if you look at back then to now, it's actually mental. So how were you guys getting that feedback from like knowing that people were playing it?
Well, I mean, sorry, Si, if I'm doing too much talking, but, you know, with our own stuff, we used to road test it with our mates. It was all about that, because if you were the same in those days, Jay, but used to spend every waking hour that you weren't at school or college, or in bed or eating dinner at your parents', you would be with a group of mates sitting around someone's house listening to music, doing that, and that was our our MySpace, our SoundCloud. It was a group of mates, and we would come around, play some tapes and gauge reaction, and they go, oh yeah, this is wicked, don't really like this, that bit sounds shit, or stuff like that, brutal feedback. And but we were with a really tight circle of friends who all used to go raving, who all used to go record shopping. It was like, every bloke who was 19, 20 in 1990 used to buy dance records. Everyone, I'm probably the only one out of my group of friends, well, me and Si, who still do that, to my knowledge. But back in the day, everyone, and you'd have someone who was into Belgian techno, someone who was into hip hop, someone who would buy, US house, someone who would just buy acid stuff, someone who would buy breakbeat stuff. But all of these circle of friends would be buying records every weekend, so it was it wasn't like now, maybe if you would play some music to your mates and they were just like, you want your mate who's the plumber or your mate who's the accountant or whatever, you wouldn't necessarily want their opinion, because you wouldn't value it, because they were not stuck in the thick of it. Back in those days, all your mates were right deep in the thick of it, just like you were. So that would be how we would gauge initial reaction. Beyond that, the promos would go out to pirate DJs, and then to Kiss as well, Colin Faver, Colin Dale, those guys, when they would start playing it, you're like, oh wow, this is the shows that you were listening to, which would be those ones, as well as the pirates. When you start hearing it there, you're like, blimey, this is, we've done it.
Yeah. So like, how ingrained were you in the kind of rave scene? Were you kind of going out, week in, week out, or what was the vibe for you back then?
The weird thing was, I hadn't really taken much notice of raves. Like I said, Sean and the guys, they were going out. I think one of my first memories of it all was, like, I think I'd got up or got in from work, or was getting up to go to work or something like that, and my brother came in. And I said, well, where have you been? He said, I've been to an acid house party. I've been to a rave. So I was kind of a little bit oblivious to that side of it all, early doors. But then obviously when we got got hooked up with Rob, I think one of the very first ones I went to, or one of my earliest memories, was one that Rob actually played at. And it was in Hitchin. I think Sean was there, because there was
I was there,
New Generation. It was called New Generation, and it was like they'd broken into a warehouse, and it was just very, very basic setup, really cool sound system, like one Moonflower light, and Rob was playing. I think, if I remember rightly, Rob DJ'd under an alias on the odd occasion, and I think it was Bobby Damage, wasn't it?
Was it? I don't know.
I think I've got a flyer somewhere.
Right, I can remember that. I think that was probably September or October '89. That was.
Right. Okay. Because I remember we were there, and it was like a warehouse out the back, and at the front it was kind of like offices, and those offices fronted onto the road. And there was just loads and loads of police just like out on the street, and we'd all like park around the back and stuff like that. And obviously in them days, if you'd already got into a warehouse and it was ongoing, most of the time they'd kind of let it happen if there was too many people. It kind of went on. But I remember driving back home, and I took a couple of my friends back to ours, and I was absolutely knackered. I was dead on my feet, and they said, "Oh, well, Si, we'll crash round yours if you want." I said, okay. I said, you're going to have to be quiet because my mum and dad are in. But they'd done acid. And we got in, and I'm trying to sleep, and those two were just in my room. I won't mention names. They were just like laughing and like doing what you do when you did acid. I remember my old man coming in at about 8 in the morning going, what the fucking hell's going on? and I hadn't even made them up like a bed or anything like that. I was under my decks because I had the decks above me, and they were just like on an old big red beanbag I had and the duvet just off their tits on my bedroom floor. So yeah, that was one of my sort of first rave memories. But I mean, to be fair, my mum and dad put up with quite a lot back then. You know, I didn't have any like studio or anything at mine. I obviously had the decks and that, so I used to make quite a noise. But yeah, the raves they put up with quite a lot. And the weird thing was, at the time, my mum was a special police constable. I think my van, because I used to have a work van. I used to work for Mercury Communications. Remember the old blue phone box?
Yeah, one to one. The old flip phones, weren't they?
Yeah, I think there was remember South East at 6, the news program that used to be on. They'd done a feature on the M25 parties and stuff, and the camera panned round, and it was my van. My mum was watching South East at 6, and she's gone, "That's your van." Yeah, we were going to a party, you know. So she, you know, bless her, she used to put up with loads of crap. All of us and our mates, like Sean said, we were really, really tight with all of our mates, you know, and we used to sometimes do like these like 20, 30 person convoys, loads and loads of cars from Hertford and Ware, going out to raves, illegal and legal ones. And that was one of the times, the very first time I heard Too Bad Mice by Too Bad Mice, the title track of the first EP. That was the very first time I heard it out on one of those nights. A load of us went to the T2 aircraft hangar that was being put on by the Eclipse Club in Coventry, and Mickey Finn played it, and that was the very, very first time I heard like one of our tracks out. And it was great, you know. I think One Deck was there. I think Wild was there with us and all that. Because I think he threw up in my van in the morning.
It must have been quite an experience to hear that for the first time, you know, from being in a home studio and then going, "All right, it's actually getting played out."
It was mental, yeah. I mean, because it was the rave was huge anyway. It was in an aircraft hangar. But any time, you know, after that, we went on and done some of the Chaotic Chemistry stuff as well, which was our other alias. And I remember the first time hearing a Chaotic Chemistry track. I think it was Colin Dale. I know Sean just mentioned Colin, and both those guys were really big supporters back in the day. But that was a much smaller venue. That was at Grange Farm in Chigwell. So yeah, it was always a buzz getting to hear the tracks. You know, you can't really put it into words, to be fair.
So was it at this point then you decided to go back and do the Hold It Down EP, or
No.
it was way after? So what was there anything kind of musically? So obviously you got into the studio, you've done the first track, you heard it out. There's a nice little buzz for it there. What's the next step, Sean? What you guys thinking about at this stage?
Well, yeah. So what we did after the Two Bad Mice thing, as I was saying, we then did a Chaotic Chemistry EP, which was like Shadow 5, I think was that one. That was, you know, more kind of stripped back drums and, you know, well, mainly drums and a few little samples. It was kind of an easier process because none, you know, myself nor Simon nor Rob are musicians at all. You know, none of us can play any instruments or could play any instruments. So we flipped to Chaotic Chemistry, which was intended, I guess, to be slightly more, stripped down, slightly more throwaway, slightly easier for us to make because it was, you know, less looking for music and hooks and riffs and more just focusing on the drums. But, you know, so we did that. That came really, really easily. And then and then we knew then that we were going to like rotate between Chaotic Chemistry and Two Bad Mice, and so it was when it came around to doing the Hold It Down EP. You know, we had a much clearer idea, much clearer vision before we went in of the samples that we were going to use and how we were going to put them together, kind of thing. So yeah, we you know, it seems strange saying it, but we were much more experienced when we came to make that second Two Bad Mice record.
So that's interesting, because obviously, you know, if you look now as an artist that wants to kind of build themselves up, you know, it's a brand, you know, it's about the music, it's about, you know, everything of building that up. But obviously back then, you know, people were using a lot of different aliases. So what was the reason for you guys to do like a Chaotic Chemistry after you'd done, you know, had that success with the Two Bad Mice track?
It was partially Rob, I think, or even John Knight at SRD, who was very much like Rob's, like guided Rob in terms of that kind of stuff, certainly back in the early days. So we're actually throughout Moving Shadows life cycle. But I think, you know, the consensus from those guys was that it was too soon to do another Two Bad Mice release, you know, almost immediately after the first one. That does sound strange saying it now, but you know, it seemed to make sense back in the day. So that was why we made this other record, but used a different alias, you know. And yeah, aliases have always been quite widely used in our scene. So, you know, it seemed like a fairly natural thing to do. But it also felt like, you know, Chaotic Chemistry did have a slightly different sound as well to Two Bad Mice, so it kind of made a bit of sense in that aspect as well.
So what I did want to ask you both, actually, where did the inspiration behind the name Two Bad Mice and Chaotic Chemistry from? Si, you want to take this one?
There's no real like inspiration for it. We just didn't have a name. we didn't have a name. Like we'd made No Respect, and we'd made Two Bad Mice, and the actual Two Bad Mice sample came from a Beatrix Potter story album that, you know, you would have put on back in the 80s, but like to play your kids. And I don't know why we had it. And like Rob said, "Oh, let's listen through that." And he liked that little hook, that, you know, the name Two Bad Mice. And I weren't into it. You know, I thought that's like really cheesy and a bit shit. But we didn't have a name. And that's how we became Two Bad Mice, because we were just like, we didn't have a name and we didn't know what to do really. Chaotic Chemistry was kind of thought up, like I said, you know, and Sean said, as an alias for us to experiment a little bit more. And that was when a lot of our friends were experimenting a little bit more with chemicals. So the name was natural for that. But yeah, Mice, we weren't inspired at all. We had no ideas. We were completely devoid of anything then. I mean, we just made some tracks. I mean, come on. I mean, you know, we put all our energy into that. And Rob said, "Look, we'll use that." And you know, there you go.
Yeah, fair enough.
Years later.
Yeah. So the Two Bad Mice sample was in the track, and yeah, none of us could come up with an artist name. No. And we just run out of time basically. So we said, all right, well, let's just call ourselves Two Bad Mice. Oh. Yeah, there was no grand plan, but you know, today it's worked out quite well for us, because when the more democratic gigs and festivals who rather than do their flyers by, you know, the stature of the artist, they do them alphabetically. We're number one. So we're number one on some pretty good flyers first. So yeah, that's a good bit of advice if you're choosing an artist name now, starting with a number.
Yeah, but Aaron, just something or other.
Yeah. One bad Aaron.
So just to warn you, the Archers are in the house, and so Nikki's got a question for you. She says, "Who is your favourite member of Alternate?"
Josh, Rory the dancer.
Yeah, Rory. Yeah,
Rory by a country mile. He's much more fun.
Just going to do a quick big up to everyone who's been locked on. I'm going to send it out to TT, out to Michael, Jamie Griffith, Nods is in there. Big up yourself, mate. I saw Danny Donnelly in there somewhere. Floyd was also in there as well. So big up yourself, guys. Out to Jude, out to Nikki and Mark and Farron. So, all right, let's dig a little bit more into the EP, because obviously that 4-track EP was what well and truly put you guys on the map. So, Sean, you talked a little bit about kind of getting these samples together. So, before you'd walked into that studio, were you thinking, right, I've got 4 tracks and this is the flavour we want for these tracks. These are the sounds we're going to use?
No, we didn't have the 4 tracks sussed, but Bomb Scare was pretty sussed. I'd spent a lot of time playing with samples, mixing samples together, going, right, I know this, I want this break, and I want this type of bass, and I want this sample, and and then maybe a little feel here. Really, that was pretty clear. Much more clear. Then Hold It Down was, that was something that happened a little bit more organically, but Cy came with like a bag of samples that had those breaks in Jungle Brothers, and the Emotion sample that we used in it, albeit we didn't know it was the Emotions at the time. We took it from a hip hop record that had already sampled it, so with me, with the Bomb Scare samples, putting those together, and then so with mainly with the Hold It Down samples, getting those together, it was much more kind of much less random process than the first records we'd made. And then with Weremouse, again, we had a vibe in mind there, which was like this, just when you're early into a warehouse and there aren't many bodies in there, and you have this real kind of echoey, reverby sound. It was we knew we wanted to do something stripped back and raw, like that. So that came together pretty quickly. So yeah, it was just much more of a grown up process, and we kind of felt like we knew what we were doing. And again, because Rob was the caliber of engineer that he was, he could kind of translate these ideas for us as we came in with these things, and he could make these things fit together and kind of achieve the kind of sound that we were looking for.
Because trying to work out an Atari ST and an old floppy disk or Cubase, unless you had someone that knew what they were doing, it wasn't the most intuitive program to get your head around, really, was it? No,
absolutely. And the same with the sampling, with the Akai, and if the sample was a little bit short, looping the end of a sample round to extend it. And I don't even know if we were onto the S1000 where we could time stretch at that point. Maybe we weren't. I think we were still on the 950. But yeah, if Rob knew his way around that stuff, because Rob was one of these very unusual species of people who reads the manual when he from cover to cover when he buys something new, hardware or software.
Yeah,
he'll take the manual off the top and read it. So he knew this stuff. He knew how to use this stuff. He knew what every button did and what every sub menu did. So he was able to do the stuff like, I know when we were making Hold It Down, and that sample, the I Don't Want to Lose Your Love sample, was so out of time.
That he
he spent hours where me and Si would just go and sit downstairs, and he was there for hours, like cutting it up, trying to time a little bit and move a little bit and do all of this stuff just so that it didn't sound so all over the place. It's still quite loose in the track, but when we first sampled it, we were really struggling to get anything that sounded acceptable on there.
A real challenge. So
yeah.
So once the EP's wrapped up, and talk to us about the label artwork for it. Obviously, that's an iconic cover.
Yeah. So throughout this period, right from when we did the first EP, that was when I was just doing a art and design foundation course. And then from there, I went on and I was doing graphic design HND course. So I was, that was what my intention was, to go into graphic design as a career. So I was doing those sleeves back then, and it was just we didn't. I don't even know if we discussed this or anything. We was just like, yeah, wouldn't it be funny to cut out pictures of us and our mates and stick them on in a collage? It was. It wasn't some kind of grand artistic vision behind that. It was just, yeah, should we do that? Yeah, that would be fun. Get all our mates on it. But again, it's one of those things where, looking back now, it is an iconic cover, and I think people really related to the cover because everyone in every town and village, up and down the country, had that same, not literally, group of mates. The guy who falls asleep and someone writes twat on his forehead, the one who's always doing a bong, the one who's whatever. Everyone had that kind of thing in common in those days. So I think that the cover really resonated with people.
Yeah, fair enough. I've got an interesting question from Tim Teacuts. What kind of numbers? I don't know if you guys want to divulge exactly, but interesting to know what kind of, how many it sold altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I know in the over the original and the remix and the US release, I did over 100,000. I think 120,000 or something like that in total. Wow. I mean, that was over the course of, it wasn't in that first year, but over the course of a couple of years, 3 years or something, as was maybe another set of remixes came out. But yeah, it was over 100,000 worldwide.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's get to the point. This release is out there, it's doing the damage, the DJs are receiving it. Si, like what are you guys feeling? What's happening next for you lot?
Well, things are picking up then as well. I mean, because the label was growing, and just to sort of like set a little picture. It used to be like a little sort of like a factory going on around Rob's house. You know what I mean? There was a conveyor belt of artists going around each night. So I think we had a particular night. I think it was Mondays or something like that. Then Steve Thrower, Cosmo and Dibs, he might have been there on a Tuesday. I think Steve's tuned in, so hello, mate. Then you'd have the Mixed Race guys. They'd be there on an evening. So you'd see like Dev Paradox there, Dave, Dan Monk, and all the other Herberts from Harlow. And then there'd be other people in. So, I mean, by then it was kind of, turning into a little bit of a force to be reckoned with. And we was aspiring to be like those other labels that were around us, like, Reinforced, Sub Bass, we wanted to be like them. There was this real friendly rivalry. I know Dan touched on it in his interview with you, that, you'd hear a Sub Bass track and you think, damn, that's wicked. And you'd hear a Reinforced track and you were all kind of this friendly rivalry actually what pushed this amazing music out there. It was great, you were hearing amazing tracks every week. So the label was starting to grow and sign artists. I mean, in the early stages, like Sean said, we had the bedroom studio, a stock room downstairs. I don't even think for quite a while Rob had even bought furniture. I think we had some patio chairs in there downstairs. So basically, the ground floor looked like patio chairs and just records everywhere, reaction reports. But yeah, the label was working kind of properly as a label then, and like the EP started to blow up. And one of those things, one of the reasons why, obviously there's 4 really great tracks on it. And it was at a time when there was loads of EPs, when like, there was loads of amazing 4-track EPs coming out. It was just like every week someone was releasing an amazing 4-track EP. So yeah, it was picking up a lot of traction. But I think one of the things about the EP that appealed to so many people is the different styles of track that are on there. You know, from Hold It Down, when we did Hold It Down, you know, we were kind of aiming for that big kind of anthemic sort of like breakdown and drop, kind of like Bizarre Inc. playing with Knives style.
Yeah.
But we found that Emotion sample, which we thought was quite uplifting. I mean, the actual sample is from MC Shy D. We never knew it was from the Emotions back then until Steve Thrower from Cosmo and Dibs told us. I think the story was he found a 7-inch on the road near his house and picked it up, and it was that, and that's how we found out it was the Emotions. So I mean, the EP had a lot of musical styles, so it appealed to a lot of people. So you would have kind of your more ravier DJs playing sort of like Bomb Scare and Hold It Down, and then you'd have some of your sort of like people like Ryder and that instantly picked up on Waremouse, and like Sean said, we had a particular vibe in mind for that. And one of the DJs we both loved listening to back in the day was Frankie Valentine, and we kind of made that record for Frankie, because that was the kind of stuff he played. But yeah, it was picking up loads of traction, and then from that, new relationships have been formed with people like Dan at Subbase and that. So we were kind of bouncing off of Dan. Dan was like getting us to do remixes and stuff like that, and that's how it kind of all started rolling along, and sort of like getting us some nice remix work and allowing us to work with different people. Obviously, I think we did the Blame remix after Hold It Down, didn't we, Sean? So we did the Blame remix as well just after that, and the Future Assassins remix. So yeah, it was good. Our wings were spreading, if you see what I mean, and the label was growing. There was more artists being signed to the label, more people showing interest in it, and that's when we were kind of doing a little bit more for the label as well. So Sean was starting to do covers. I had a van, as I mentioned earlier. So Rob was sort of saying, "Can you go and pick up 300 promos from Adrenaline, the pressing plant down in Slough?" So quite often, me and Sean would be going down to Slough, picking up a load of promos. The old, just the plain promos in the Moving Shadow house bags, and we'd stop off. Was it Heston Services we used to stop off at?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so we used to stop off at Heston Services, make the rubber stamp up, and stamp the records in the back of the van before we got to SRD to drop them off. So you're Moving Shadow promos that might say Cosmo and Dibs Star Eyes and stuff like that, Tone Deaf and Mashed and all that. We used to, quite a lot of the time, stamp them in the van if we were having to get them to SRD quick sharp. We would kind of do that. So our roles were starting to evolve more into working for the label, with Sean doing sort of like the art and design and stuff, and working that way. And I started chatting to other artists and kind of almost taking on a little bit of almost sort of like a little A&R role. It was fun. It was great, but I kind of think, around that time is when we start to realise you're kind of like a proper record label, and because you get told that you're in the top 50 in the charts, which was kind of like beyond our wildest dreams. It was just bonkers at the time. I think we got to, was it 46, Sean, or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was 46 or 44 for Hold It Down EP.
Yeah, so you begin to realise that you kind of, you're working for a proper label, and you're doing something that's obviously being appreciated by people and picked up by people and enjoyed. So yeah, it was pretty mad that time, and it was coming in thick and fast with all the remixes, coupled with going out as often as you possibly could. So we would be at Rage pretty much every Thursday, and that was great. Like Sean said, that was our kind of MySpace and social media at the time. We didn't have that. Record shops and raves were where we would go and exchange ideas, exchange music with people, and Rage was a big part of our lives back then.
Yeah.
But, I got bugger all work done on a Friday for my job. I don't know how my company even kept me on during that period. I would hardly ever be in on a Friday. So we would be at Rage on a Thursday, then you'd be back out Friday, Saturdays. There was some Sunday clubs as well, like breakfast clubs and all that sort of stuff. So it was hectic, but it was good. We were loving it. We were loving every minute of it.
Well, I was going to say, at what point did you give up, the day job to commit to this full time, or did you always kind of balance the two?
It was a lot later as it goes. I mean, to be fair, I still had a van. I think Rob liked the fact that I had a van, but I was still working. Rob ended up buying a little red van. It looked like a little red loaf of bread on wheels, a little Bedford Rascal. And Sean was obviously doing his art and design. So we were kind of juggling quite a lot of things. I'd go to work, then come around the studio, and we would be reading reaction reports from people, mailing records out to people. Bev would be there doing it. The mixed race guys might be there doing it. And Sean would be, that was when you'd started in the cupboard under the stairs, wasn't it?
Do you know what? That I was literally going to ask you that. Not only has Steve asked it, Nikki asked it, but also, Conrad messaged me. Blame said, "Can you ask Sean about the cupboard under the stairs at Rob Playford's house?" So yeah. I think we've reached quite a natural point to get an answer.
So yeah, and funnily enough, I've just I only watched my first Harry Potter film a few months ago because my daughter's just started reading the books and watching the films. So I wondered why people kept calling me Harry Potter, and so at Rob's house where the studio was upstairs, so it was a 3-bedroom house. So he had the studio in one bedroom, his bedroom in another bedroom, and the stockroom was in the 3rd bedroom, and then downstairs, as Si said, patio furniture and more records. And the only place to fit a desk with a computer on for me was in the cupboard under the stairs. Now, to be fair, the door was always open. Okay, and in fact, they might have even taken the door off, possibly, because I don't remember ever sitting in there with the door closed. But that was my office for quite a significant amount of time until the whole operation moved up to London, which would have been, crikey, a bit later in 94, maybe end of 94.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd left. Well, I didn't go to college that much because they used to let me have time off because I was working on real design projects. So they said, okay, yeah, you don't need to come in for a couple of weeks. So I was working for Shadow in that respect. And my head of year at my art college, he had in the interview, he'd asked me what I'd do in my spare time, and I'd said, I'm kind of getting involved in a record label and all that. And he was like, oh, no, right. He goes, yeah, I used to work for EMI. I used to be in charge of getting the masters done and getting records cut and stuff like that. So we just started kind of chewing the fat. And so he was really just happy for me to be involved in that. So I was, afforded quite a lot of flexibility at college. And then when I finished my course, which would have been in 93, I think, then that was when I pretty much committed full time to moving Shadow. And then maybe a year later, I think they moved up to London. I think that was when Si packed his job in and was full time on the books as well. I think that's about right.
Yeah, we left the house and we went up to St Anne's Court, and that was around the time that Rob said, "Do you want to be directors of the company?" And to be fair, I didn't know, didn't have a clue what a director was. And he said, "I'll make you director of the company. The harder you work for the label, the more money we'll make, the more money you'll make, etc., etc." But by then, we'd signed up some amazing acts as well. People like Fell, Play, Hyperon Experience, J&J and Richie.
Omni Trio,
yeah, can't forget Omni Trio, Gav, Cloud9, and the label was flying. So yeah, we kind of left our day jobs. And for me, I always look back at the time when we started at St Anne's Court as the first real time that we started working like full time, fully for the label. We've become directors of the label, and obviously, that was the time as well when Rob had been working heavily with Goldie on the Timeless album, because a lot of Timeless was actually recorded in the Moving Shadow studio in their house.
Wow.
So one of those people that would come up for a night in the studio would have been Goldie. And G used to come down on the train. He used to get picked up at the train station and come up to the studio. And so that was great. That period of time, just hearing what was coming from upstairs from all the artists that were involved with the label, and obviously, you had a seminal album being made upstairs as well during that period when Goldie was working there with us. And I think he even used to borrow your car, didn't he, on the drive home after studio?
Yeah, well, he didn't have a car. I think he hadn't. Yeah, because he hadn't signed Timeless, so he was making it.
Yeah.
He hadn't signed it, so he was pretty potless. I think he was living with Gus up in Chalk Farm, and jumping on a train or getting the lift down. So I used to lend him my car to go to the shops and whatnot back then, before he got his advance from FFRO and bought himself his Merc. That, as Si says, that was really just good times, exciting times. That period from 94 through to when we moved up to London, got the studio there. I mean, the story behind that was that Goldie had been and recorded in that studio. Prior to moving into it, it had belonged to Mel Gaynor from Simple Minds, I believe, and that was why Goldie had been in there recording with him for something or other, doing some drums or something. He'd said he was moving out, so we went and looked at it, and took 2 floors on. One was a studio, one was an office there. I mean, prior to that, for those who don't know, the building in St Anne's Court was Trident Studios, so that was where Bowie and the Beatles and all sorts of megastars from the 60s, 70s or 60s used to record there. It was a world famous studio back in that time.
That's crazy. So not only was Moving Shadow and all the artists creating amazing history, it was on top of a load of history that had already been laid already.
Yeah, you would see, if you looked out the windows on any given weekday, there would be tours coming past, looking up, pointing up, mainly of like Japanese tourists who'd come around to see this famous building where I forget which of Bowie's albums. I think a couple of them were recorded there. I think one Beatles album was recorded there, and the Trident desk. I forget what it is. I don't know if it was originally out of Abbey Road or something, but that it was. I think I'm trying to think if whether the desk was named after the studio or the studio named after the desk, but that's still, I think like Universal Audio and things like that are doing these plugins that are called Trident plugins and things like that are trying to recreate that. They do all the plugins doing the classic British gear. I think that's one of them that they're doing.
So I want to take it back to 92. Obviously, the tail end of 92 and 93. 93, was a big year for the evolution of that music and that scene. Jungle was starting to come in. The music was going one direction for happier stuff and under the darker stuff. What was going on behind the scenes at Moving Shadow in regard to kind of discussing this and what direction the label would go in?
I don't remember there being any
really
explicit discussions about it. It was just a natural progression. Everyone would come back from a rave and go, "Wow, did you hear that thing? It was really, dark, and as tunes kind of got darker, it was almost like a darkness competition. We'll go, right, we need to find a scary sample, or we need to, make it just darker and darker sounding. But then the people who were making music for the label would just be doing their own version of that, but there was no kind of no one steering the artistic direction in terms of saying, right, we need stuff that sounds is darker sounding. It was just everyone's natural progression, or most people's just kind of latched onto that sound. When you would go out and hear like Randall or someone, Rocket, let's say, and he would be playing that kind of that sound, or Roller Express, and you would just be like, oh yeah, more of this please. And I think everyone was feeling that same.
Yeah, nice. So Sean, let's talk about Helicopter Tune, right? I'm sure most people know, but if you don't, Sean was singly responsible as Deep Blue for Helicopter Tune. Let's talk about how that all came about.
First up, the first kind of royalty check, the first substantial royalty check that I got from Moving Shadow for the Too Bad My stuff. I say substantial, 1,500 quid or whatever it was, which was a pretty good amount of money in those days, especially if you're living with your parents still, as I was, and like in working with Rob, I'd learned, he'd showed me how to use Logic or C-Lab Creator, as it was on the Atari. So I'd kind of learned to use that, and through the iterations of that, where you went from just having the numbers on the screen to where you had like visual representations of your bars and your channels. So I'd been learning that. I'd been learning how to use an Akai while we were in the Shadow studio. So with that first royalty check, I went out and bought myself. Akai just released a budget sampler called the SO1, which was like a 12-bit sampler. Could have maximum of 8 samples. I think it had like 2 seconds, or no, I'm trying to think. Just a few seconds max of sampling time. Maybe 8 seconds. I don't know. Anyway, so I got myself one of those, got myself a Korg 01W, which was the same Korg that we had in the Moving Shadow studio, and just started making my own stuff, at home. Just experimenting with stuff. And it was kind of at that time where there was different styles were coming in. So you had that darker style, but it was also where like Bookham had started to come onto the scene as a producer, having done Demon's Theme, having done Logical Progression, then Demon's Theme, and then music, and it was like real combination of those styles, plus having my own equipment to be able to kind of just absorb those ideas and try to come up with something that was how I ended up coming up with a helicopter. The whole track was done and finished, but it never had a helicopter at the start, until the very last minute. I'd mastered it or pre-mastered it to that. I was about to post that up to Groove Rider, and I just listened back one more time, and I thought, oh god, it comes in a bit too quickly, starts a bit abruptly. It needs something before the beats drop in. So I just flicked through a few bits, and just there's literally a preset on the Yamaha DX100 called Helicopter. So I just pressed that key, held it down, modulated it for a couple of seconds up and down, and then recorded that, re-recorded it, put it on the DAT, and sent it to Groove.
You basically made the ultimate rewind tune.
Yeah. But that literally, the helicopter bit was I can't even call it an afterthought. It was just I think I'd written Groove Rider's name and address on the Jiffy bag, and probably put the DAT in it before I thought, let me just check. Yeah, you know, so it was just pure chance that it ended up with that on it. And I suspect that without that helicopter bit on it, you know, the story could have been very different. I mean, not least because no one would have known what to call it.
Well,
But,
you know what? That was an important thing, right? You know, having that identity to a track, because, you know, you didn't have the internet to consult with other people. There wasn't, you know, there wasn't Shazam or Discogs or anything like that. So to simply just walk into a shop and go, that helicopter tune.
yeah.
Everyone that works in a record shop knows exactly what that tune is.
And it wasn't even called the helicopter tune, you know, when it was sent to Groove Rider. It was like, it was called Fantasy Number One or something like that. It was, you know, it adopted the name, the helicopter tune, when that was what people who had heard it out started calling it, started asking record shops for, you know, that tune with a helicopter in, or the helicopter tune. Have you got that? You know, so that's why it ended up being called that fairly unsubtle name. Was just, because it, like, you know, we did have a discussion, you know, SRD, like, you have to call it the helicopter tune. Rob was saying you have to call it the helicopter tune. So like, okay, right, it makes sense.
It's got a helicopter sample in it. Pretty simple, actually. We'll just call it that.
Yeah.
So with the production side, what was the reason? Because you guys weren't releasing as much as kind of sort of Two Bad Mice. Was this because you were kind of getting full involved with the label? What was going on there?
Well, like Sean said, he went out and bought some equipment with his first royalty check. I bought a Sega Mega Drive. We mentioned that to Conrad. Ben Conrad done a little sort of like interview with us as well. But yeah, we were more involved with the label. With the last thing we'd done in Stevenage was the Underworld EP, and that was very much a time when Sean had been really sort of like picking up on using the studio equipment and that, and Rob was kind of leaving us to our own devices in the studio. He'd be popping downstairs more often than we would have been, like in the early days. So we were playing around with bits and pieces. So Underworld was kind of the last thing we did at the studio in Stevenage. Then after that, which I obviously told you about earlier on this week, just after Sean had done Helicopter, we did a track which we gave the name Jupiter, and that was very much just like a rough sketch of a track that we done around Sean's house using all of the kit that Sean just mentioned there, that he made the helicopter on, and we recorded that to that, and then gave that to some DJs like Randall and people. And it got a really good reaction, but we never got around to actually finishing it, and it kind of just got lost. And then our roles progressed at Moving Shadow, kind of working full time. So, you know, that was when we moved up to St Anne's Court. Caroline was employed. Rose was working there. Gavin was working there as well. So that, you know, Rob had a full team of staff, and he was working continuously down in the studio with shadow artists and Goldie. So yeah, that was kind of the very last track that we wrote together back then with Jupiter, which has been, you know, refound, you know, discovered again, and it's coming out very shortly. I mean, Sean found all the discs and he went out and bought the old kit and put it all back together. So
do you know what? I do remember you seeing a post saying that, you know, I know that you'd found a video or there was something about the Jupiter track. And so then, Sean, I'm sure you said that you basically went on eBay and just bought all your old studio gear.
I did, yeah.
Floppy disks in.
Yeah, so yeah, it's all up here. I found the floppy disks which I thought were lost. I thought I remembered throwing them in a skip or at the dump. I could picture myself having done that. And then it was a couple of years ago when I was around at my mum's house, and she said, "Oh, there's loads of your old boxes in the garage. Do you want to get rid of them?" And I opened one up and opened up a thing, and all the floppy disks were there for all my old stuff, boxes and boxes of them. So yeah, so I got on eBay, you know, found myself an Akai SO1, found myself a Korg 01W, because all of this stuff was like helicopter tune, Jupiter, etc., were all actually sequenced on the onboard sequencer of the Corgo 1.
Right.
So so I got on eBay, found those, took a little while to track them down and get working ones, got them, found some MIDI leads, MIDI'd everything up, put the discs in, loaded them up, hit play, and it came out. The music started coming out. It's amazing,
That is amazing. And so it's coming out. Well, I heard someone's playing it on their show on Tuesday, so that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, mate. I mean, Sean obviously went and got all the bits and pieces, and he said you got to come round because it's actually working. And then I think, did we not lose it again? Did we not?
Yeah, I lost it.
Yeah, we lost the disc again, like a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because Goldie said, "Oh, I'll have it. I'll have it. I want it." Because people knew of it. People heard it on mixtapes, and recently some footage appeared on YouTube of us performing it at the Laserdrome on New Year's Eve, and that's up on YouTube. And the really bizarre thing is, the footage appeared on YouTube literally a couple of weeks ago, and someone tagged us in it. And it's obviously someone had a camcorder in the Laserdrome on New Year's Eve, and it's the only time that we did Jupiter, and we did a chaotic chemistry track, and we also did the helicopter PA as well. So there's this like grainy footage of Jupiter being performed by me and Sean doing helicopter, and then us doing chaotic chemistry along with Flux on stage as well. So it's bizarre that we found it again. So I think you heard it a number of years later somewhere, didn't you? You heard it. I think was it at a wake? Was it at Kemi's wake?
Oh yeah. So it was long lost, and it was a Kemi's wake, and there was some music playing just while everyone was having a drink and whatnot. Like old drum and bass and jungle and stuff like that. And this track came in, and I was just thinking, what is this? I know this one. And it got about halfway through, and I was like, shit, this is that track that me and Si did. That was I hadn't heard probably since we did it because the original DAT was lost. The discs were lost. Everything was lost. And as far as I could remember, we'd only sent it to maybe Randall and Groove Rider or something like that. So that was weird. And then but to them find it, because I knew I still had a couple of the samples knocking around it, because one of them was stolen from Mark Archer. It's called Jupiter because of the Jupiter kind of pad that's in there, which we nicked from Archer when they sent down the parts for an alternate remix that we did in, whenever that would have been, 92, 93. And I'd always really loved this really lush, rich pad chord that had come down as part of those samples. So I'd put that aside. So we can thank Archer for Jupiter. And Rory.
Yeah, and Rory. I mean, like Sean obviously got it all back and working. Said you got to come around and listen to it, and it was great. But it was like then what to do with it, and we said like we'll send it over to Steve from Scar Metalheads, and Steve's tinkered around with it and just made it sound so good because it was still pretty grainy. And it's coming out as part of this Metalheads 25-year celebration anniversary thing. But I think the 25-year anniversary thing's 2 years late or something because of all the production and stuff. So it's going to eventually see the light of day, which is great. But that was the last thing we wrote together. But in that pile of discs, I think Sean will probably correct me, but there was other stuff of Sean's that hasn't seen the light of day. And I think there's also, we did a VIP remix of Helicopter, didn't we? We called it the Two Bad Mice Wings of the Apache remix of Helicopter. And we only ever gave that to Groove Rider. and that was for New Year's Eve, wasn't it? 93, if I remember rightly, and it appears on a rave tape. It's something like Utopia or something like that. Ryder plays it, and someone's ripped it on SoundCloud, one of them sort of like lost dub plate sites on SoundCloud or whatever. So there was, I think Sean found the discs for the Wings of the Apache remix of Helicopter in there as well as I think loads of Deep Blue unreleased stuff and things like that. He's got a treasure trove anyway. He's got loads of stuff hanging around.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is just sketches, to be fair. There's not much stuff that's kind of fully formed, if you like. There's one or two bits, that we'll see that might see the light of day sooner or later.
We shall keep our ears and eyes eagerly peeled for that one. So yeah, well, that's great news that's coming out of Jupiter with the Metalheads release. So, obviously jumping forward to roundabout now times, we obviously need to talk about Overshadow. Firstly, what a phenomenal kickoff to a label. If you're going to kick a label off, that is the way to do it. But I want to just take a few steps back, just from how did this all come about, basically, with Overshadow?
Right. So obviously, I'll cut a very long story as short as I can. We left Moving Shadow in 1997, and it wasn't a mud-flinging competition back then. There was a bit in the press about why we'd left, but we thought that we were leaving on quite good terms. However, we gave Rob our notice because we felt that we could no longer work with Rob, and it was just that. It was just a plain and simple. We could no longer work with Rob. There'd been a few other little issues, but nothing too controversial. I think Rob had been having a bit of a hard time working on the second album with Goldie on Saturn's Return, and I think Rob had been sacked from that project. But we were running the label with Caroline and the rest of the guys, and kind of on our own, because those guys were off touring and doing stuff, and we just came to a decision that we could no longer work together. And just to sort of put it into context, everyone left Moving Shadow. It wasn't just me and Sean. Everyone left, and it was just Rob left there. And Rob asked if we could give him time to sort of find new staff and that kind of didn't materialise. We were kind of locked out of the offices one day, and that was the last time we spoke to Rob in 1997. I think we were asking for some of our bits back from the office, but we never got them. So we were given a little temporary home by Goldie, so we worked at the Metalheads office for a little while, and then we started Partisan, and it was funded by One Little Indian. And we were really grateful to the guys there to give us an opportunity. But it was, it was a proper full-on record label, and we'd always kind of said from the start that we need to give this label 5 years to really find its feet. And we signed some amazing artists back then. I think we were possibly the first label to maybe release something by Total Science, Dev Paradox. We were working with people like Clue. Banachek, which is Steve Kilty. I think we had something from Dylan as well. And the label was going to go places. We had stuff from Future Engineers. So we were
Addiction, DJ Addiction as well.
Addiction. Hello, Jay, if you tuned in, and James. So, I mean, we had some great artists, but we just weren't given the time. So, Partisan was a great little label, and I think it would have been amazing if we'd have been given the time, but it just didn't materialise. So I left, and then it kind of I think it ended up just shutting down. I think Sean would probably enlighten us. I think.
Yeah. I mean, just to cut a long story short, there, One Little Indian basically had loads of sub labels. I had like Clean Up, Fat Cat, Rough Trade, a couple of other sub labels. So there were about 6 sub labels there, and One Little Indian basically ran out of money. They had this massive tax bill to pay, like what it was, 10 million quid or something, that they were going to defer, but then it got called in, so they had to shut down all of their sub labels overnight and cut their staff. So there was like about 50 of us working there across One Little Indian, all the labels, and then the following day it was down to 20 staff or something like that. So Yeah, so that was the story with Partisan. We were 1 year into our 5-year plan when we had to shut down.
So yeah, I mean, basically, Partisan could have been great. It could have been really great. But we'd always stayed in touch with the artists. A lot, there was a lot of local artists to us, people like Conrad Blame and Gav Nookie. We'd always stayed in touch with them, but further afield as well, just with the odd phone call and stuff. And there was a fair amount of time between Partisan and sort of getting on to thinking about doing another label. We'd chatted about kind of burying the hatchet with Rob very, very briefly. And I said to Rosie one day, I think I'm going to chat to Rob, and I'm going to have a chat with Sean about it. And I kind of picked my time to chat with Sean about it. We were going to a gig in Leeds, and I thought, well, if I bring it up early on in the journey, Sean can't get out of the car and say, I'm not going to talk about it. So we'll have a chat about it. And I said to Sean that I think we should reach out to Rob and maybe hold out an olive branch, because we're older and wiser now. And I've got an idea for kind of like a little project involving social media, which wasn't around when we left Moving Shadow, and maybe sort of getting people to choose their favourite ever Moving Shadow tracks, compiling one last album, and maybe getting some current artists that weren't around at the time of Moving Shadow to do some of their interpretations of it. So, after Sean really veered off the road, he kind of sort of like, I could see Sean's creative juices flowing in his mind going. He said, well, let's go and chat to Rob and see how it goes. I said, this doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. This is like one last hurrah, because I mean, Moving Shadow, in a lot of people's eyes, kind of just disappeared off the planet one day. It's almost like someone cleared their desk and shut the door and shut the office, and that was it. There was no big hurrah, we finished the label. It was kind of like a little bit of a sad story, little like a sad ending to the story. So we reached out to Rob. We'd always had Rob's details, because Moving Shadow always account to us and stuff like that. And we just said, do you want to meet up and have a chat? And he got back to us. I mean, fair play to him for getting back to us. And the idea was to go down and meet him and kind of not really discuss too much about what had happened in the past, chat about what we're doing now. We didn't know if Rob had kids. We didn't know anything. And we went down and met Rob in a bar down in London. I think this must have been, 2012, Sean?
Yeah, probably. It's a while ago now, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a bit weird, because we were already in there, and then Rob came in, and just sort of naturally, I said, do you want a drink? So I shot to the bar to get a drink and left Sean sitting at the table with Rob, which I think was pretty awkward. But once we started chatting, we ran this idea sort of through with Rob, and we said, look, we think that there should be like one last hurrah, maybe like a really nicely presented album, like CD package sort of thing. And Rob kind of was like into the idea that we'd floated to him. But then kind of Rob was a very methodical person, and if you ever came to the Moving Shadow office in London, we had a massive great whiteboard, and every release was on it. What day it was being test pressed, promos, the release day, and it was all very methodical and written out as a plan. And we could kind of see Rob worrying about what we were talking about then, and he mentioned the fact that we've all got jobs now, and that he's got a hobby like sailing, and he quite often goes around the world sailing. So that idea kind of died a death a few weeks later. But we'd spoken with Rob a couple of times after that. I think Sean had a coffee with him, and I went to dinner with him when AK flew over from the States. But it kind of sort of died a death relatively early on. I think he kind of had an idea of maybe doing some Too Bad My stuff with us again, but we weren't really into that idea. But one of the things I touched on, is we'd always stayed in touch with the artists. So a few years after that, we started doing these Legends of Moving Shadow like takeovers at places like Bangface and stuff. And the first one we did was on a Sunday night at Bangface, and James kindly let us take over room 2. So we had Brent from Aquasky there playing. We had Gav Nookie, we had John Fell play, and Flux came up to MC, and it was mad. I literally went and stood in the audience and cried my eyes out. and Mark and Nicky actually walked past me while I was standing there. Well, I was standing there having a meltdown, but it was nice because, you know, Brent had been playing in Spain, I think, like that weekend, and he flew in from Spain. He'd been playing at a breaks thing, and he came straight up to Liverpool, and he had to drive back to Bournemouth, and you know, just seeing the guys back together, and it was like, you know, we'd never ever been apart, and we'd obviously been chatting to people like Jay and Richie and all the other guys, just, and then we've done a few more of them. So the next one, Jay and Richie came up, and you know, Dave Trax was involved as well, and just seeing all the guys back together, we all started talking again. And one of the things that did come up was gripes with the label. You know, what's the label doing now? You know, we can't ever really find out what's going on. We get paid royalties, but we don't really know if our music's being promoted. We don't know what's going on. It's pretty difficult to talk to them sometimes. And, you know, they're not controversial with anything. They're not knocking people or anything like that. But it was just like the guys felt that there was a need for the label to be doing a little bit more. And you could never really get anywhere with trying to find out if that could happen. And then there was other people talking to me saying, you know, what's going on with the label side? You know, why is it sitting on the shelf gathering dust? One of those people was Paul from Pendulum. You know, he said, Si, you know, what's going on? You've got an amazing label there, and you know, speak to Rob, find out what's going on. And there was lots of sort of like chitter chatter about the label and stuff. And you know, we had a few gripes, but like I said, nothing controversial. So I just decided. I said to Sean, look, why don't we get all the artists, try and get them in one room, and have a chat about what they want to know, and we'll tell them what we know, and just get everybody in. So it took a little while to organise, and we kind of done it with the sort of like we said, you know, we're not going to be posting this on social media. There was no photos on social media. We hired a bar in King's Cross a few years ago now, and to be fair, loads of the lads came down, and some of those guys haven't been in a room together for 20 plus years. So we had Essence of Aura down there. We had Foul Play, Dave Trax. We had Ben, who recorded under the name Basic Unit. We had Ant Miles down there, Higher Sense, right? The Aqua Sky guys drove up from Bournemouth. It was madness to see all the artists.
Yeah, okay.
It was really emotional. It was great. You know, Dom came down. And we said, look, whether you've had one track on the label, I mean, Con was there, Steve Thrower, whether you've had one track on the label or 10, or you've got a massive, you know, back catalogue, come down, we'll have a drink, we'll have a chat, and we'll talk about the label. James Carlito, I mean, if there's anybody I've forgotten, sorry, but loads of people came down.
Justin, Clue,
FBD Project, Neil. Yeah, I think it was Ashley Pulse down there as well. It was nuts anyway, and it was also nice organising it because I managed to track down some people who we'd lost contact with years ago. So I was finding people via LinkedIn. So, you know, Rog from Tone Deaf. You know, he started Void. He started Void Sound Systems. He invented Void Audio.
Oh, really? Wow.
How about that? Right? That's just nuts, right? So we was finding out all these people, and we got them all in a room, and we all had a drink and we had a chat, and we all chatted about our theories as to what the label's doing now, what it should do, and stuff. And yeah, I won't lie, we'd spoken about, you know, chatting to solicitors and stuff like that, because we've got a lot of our work tied up in the label, and there's a lot of people's works there that, you know, they've worked an awfully long time on, and it's taken up a big part of their life, and they kind of don't really have a say in what happens with it, because we all sign contracts for life, apart from a couple of artists who thankfully got solicitors involved. So, you know, we all just threw ideas around and chatted to each other. But the main part of the exercise was to get people chatting, people exchanging numbers and that. And I got quite drunk, and we got the train back. And literally, when I got home, I was just getting message after message off of the guys that came up saying, "So we're fully behind you and Sean. Whatever you guys want to do, we'll get involved." So we knew we had that backing then, but we never really acted on it. We've still had like conversations with Moving Shadow about what's happening with back catalogue and all that sort of stuff, all the usual stuff. And I have to admit, the label's always said it's got our best interests at heart, and we get paid on time and stuff like that. But there is these underlying issues that, you know, we want to try and do more with what we've put into the label for a big part of our lives. So we kind of toyed with the idea of starting something,
Yeah.
And I just messaged Sean one day and said, look, should we see what people think? You know, if we actually just put it out there, shall we start a label and see who's up for it? And literally, I text as many of the guys as I could who were still producing stuff, and everyone came back and said, yeah, you know, Tony Justice, everybody was like, yeah, we'll work with you guys again. Just let us know what you want. And it was literally that easy. So, I mean, straight away within an hour, we had an amazing roster of old moving shadow artists that want to work with us again. And that's when kind of the hard work started of like, okay, well, we've got all these guys, we're going to form a label. You know, people like Conrad's been brilliant. You know, he's always saying, "Sight, I'm here for you. If you want to go for it, I've got some tracks." People like Dom, everybody was very, very supportive. And, you know, there was people saying, why are you going to do it now? And all that sort of stuff. But everybody was brilliant. So we just said, right, well, let's go for it. And to be fair, there's been some really good people sort of in the background supporting all of this from the beginning. Bex, my missus, has been absolutely amazing with regards to it. She's like really, really pushed it. She's got to know all of the lads. She got to meet some of the guys at Clash Mouth and all that. And she's really, really pushed us with regards to sort of like, you know, saying to me, right, you should listen to that, do that, and all that. And she's been really, really great. And we've got another guy on board who comes out raving with us, doing some design with Sean and that, Craig. And he's amazing as well. And then we've got some other people helping out with like A&R. So we've got Dave Tracks helping us out with A&R and quality control. We've got Jason Addiction. He's helping out with some of that stuff. We've got Mike from Blue Skin. He's helping out with QC and stuff because these guys have got perfect ears when it comes to vinyl and that. So we've got a really, really good team around us. We just needed to make it happen. We've got young Nick Manifestos helping out with a bit of design work for me on the odd occasion as well. So got a great team. We just needed to sort of like put it all together and come up with a brand and a label name. And we kind of agonised over it. And that's why we have someone brilliant like Sean on board who, you know, had, you know, a massive part to play with regards to how Moving Shadow looked back in the day. And also, I mean, Sean designed the Timeless cover for Goldie, you know, so him and Craig were starting to throw ideas around, and you know, we were worried about the logo and all that, so all the usual stuff you worry about, because obviously Moving Shadow's got such an iconic logo. And we had a meeting one night. There was myself and Sean and Craig there, and basically those guys just said, right, well, let's not agonise over it too much, because some of the best known logos in the world are quite badly designed, and they're the most memorable ones. So those guys came up with this and the name, and so basically we then had a brand, and obviously it all fell into place when Conrad said, I've got something for you, we can go with this as a 12. And that's when we started to find out about the whole new record market and vinyl sales and stuff. So we've been really, really lucky, to be fair, the artists that we've got involved. And the thing that we wanted to draw a line under, we wanted to draw a line in the sand and say, look, this is a new label involving Moving Shadow artists and new artists. We wanted to make it really, really clear that we're going to be signing new artists as well. And you know, we've got something coming from ASC, amazing producer. We've asked people like Double O to do stuff for us. We've asked Kid Drama, and the other amazing thing is all these guys have said yeah. They're like, we'd love to be on board. So we've selected some artists we love and respect, but also some random artists as well. And we did get some amazing demos in as well. And one of those demos is we've signed. It's going to come out as one of our releases later this year. So the label has got some amazing music coming out. And one of the main things we wanted to do with it was to find that sound, but also not make it obvious. Moving Shadow was never obvious. You could have a 12 that you know was a complete dance floor killer, but on the other side it might have been a slowed down tempo, what we used to call trip hop track and stuff. And we used to take a bit of a risk on some of those things, but that's what was one of the things that made the label so well loved. And we want to do it with this. Sean made a very valid point right in the early days when we were starting Overshadow, was that it can't just be about dance floor. You know, it just cannot be about dance floor. We want to be putting out thought-provoking jungle and D&B and all sorts of electronic music. And one of our releases isn't jungle and it's not D&B. And it's utterly amazing. We listened to it, Sean and myself listened to it, and we sent it up to Craig because it's kind of his cup of tea as well. And Bex, my missus, loved it as well. So we're putting out all sorts of electronic music, and you know, we don't want to be pigeonholed. Very much like Moving Shadow. You know, you couldn't pigeonhole Moving Shadow stuff. And the support from the lads and the wider community as well, people like yourself, magazines like DJ Mag, Mix Mag, people like Cole Loban, Joe Muggs, Benji B, they've all been really, really supportive of us, and we can't thank them enough. And of course, all the people that are buying music and hassling us for more music, you know, it's absolutely blown us away, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, but I mean, look, you know, you guys obviously had a pivotal part to play in the success of Moving Shadow, and having, you know, YouTube behind it and that ethos carrying forward. I've every confidence that it's going to be a great success. And as I say, you know, for me, that Liftoff tune, Blame, is just epic. So it's an amazing tune to kick it off. So you got Dom and Roland back in for number 2.
Yes.
And so what's the details on that one, when that one's going to see the light of day?
Well, we've just sorted out the TPs. So I know there's loads of problems with manufacturing at the moment. You probably see it online. Sure. Being a vinyl lover, we've been lucky because the pressing plant is literally 15 minutes from mine and Sean's house, where we got Comrades pressed up. And even before starting a record label, I'm very much a fan of doing business with people face to face. I like it. I run my own business. I like the fact that I can go and chat to someone over the other side of a desk and stuff. Obviously a little bit different in these times, but we've been lucky that we're still pressing in the UK with regards to all of that. So Dom's is being TP'd. That's been approved by Dom. I mean, it's like you've obviously heard it. I mean, it's a right thunderous assault on rear drums, and it's great. You know, I just took that phone call one day and Dom was like, you know, I've got something for you, and it's amazing. You know, it's classic Dom, and that's number 2. So that we've just approved all that. So fingers crossed, we might get a pre-order up on it, sort of like within the next 6 weeks, hopefully. We've got Comrades repress that is going to be happening hopefully in the next week, 2 weeks. We're going to be doing it on Bandcamp Day, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
And that's going to be the special edition one signed by yourselves and Conrad as well, right?
Well, they're going up on Friday. So the marbled edition is signed ones are going up on Friday, and then we're going to be doing the repress hopefully on Bandcamp Day, so that people can get their hands on Star Traveller and Liftoff. So Tom's is obviously up next, and then we've got some other tracks. I mean, Sean's doing an EP as well. He hasn't told me much about it, to be fair. And we've got Dave Tracks has done.
He's lost the floppy disk, that's why.
Yeah.
I think I saw the files when I was around the studio last that had tracks on there that were possibly to do with the EP. But I've not heard anything at all, apart from one track that might be an old track that might be going on there. Dave Tracks has delivered 3 really, really good tracks. Like I said, we've got a 2-tracker from ASC, and you know, James has been sending me stuff. You know, I think even before we had the idea of starting Overshadow, and his stuff's amazing. I think I sent you a little clip the other day.
Yes.
Just so that you could hear, and we've got other artists doing bits. All of the artists are chatting about doing bits for us. You know, even the new guys, I've given them some briefs to work on. We've got Mark Technical Itch who's working on some bits and pieces. I was chatting to Ashley DJ Pulse the other night about a potential album project. But the other thing that we're doing is we've chatted to a few artists that haven't been around for a little while, and about making a little bit of a comeback. And I've already received a couple of tracks from 2 of them, and hopefully that'll make a few waves when they see the light of day. But you know, there's a lot of time taken up with production now. There's awful long lead times, but we've planned it out pretty well, we think, for the first half of 2021. And we've always got a contingency if production is really that bad and difficult that we could do like a digital album with the guys. But yeah, all the guys are working on bits. You know, James Ritchie, Just Jungle, Ashley Pole's Technical Itch. I've asked Tony Justice to do something when he can. So yeah, there's a good volume of tracks coming in.
Nice.
It's fun, and obviously, like I said, we've got Sean and Craig on the design, and for us, I mean, the branding's worked out really well. It's, you know, the branding's quite strong, and it's all worked. It's all fallen into place really, really nicely.
Nice, mate. So, Sean, do you want to give us a little hint as to what kind of stuff you're working on, or is that on lockdown?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. As usual, it's kind of hard to explain what it is. Yeah, it's just going to be me doing my thing. I think there'll probably be one track that's more 90s inspired, and one track that is much more modern sounding, maybe. There's possibility that it might end up being a double pack with a couple of old lost tracks from back in the day as well.
Nice.
So you know, we haven't quite resolved what it's going to be yet, and there's still work to do. But yeah, it's exciting to be you know, getting Deep Blue out of retirement in some form.
Yeah. Well, listen, you know, it's been great talking to you guys. Just been lovely hearing like the passion you guys have got for this, and I've every confidence that Overshadow is going to make a serious mark, and it's exciting to get a few little teasers of what's coming up. So yeah, chaps, I think we'll leave it there. I've taken enough of your time so far. So listen, thank you very much for your time today, and yeah, best of luck going forward with Overshadow.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, nice one, Jazz.
All right, nice one, chaps. Catch you later.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
See ya.